Okay, we're live.
The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. A show for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Oba Tashaka and his guests are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Oba Tashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Oba Tashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Greetings to the Dr. Oba Tashaka Show family. How's the family doing? Everybody okay? You cool? Copacetic? Anybody feeling down because of the times they're living in? Hopefully this show will help lift your black behinds up. And anybody that was dumb enough to vote for Trump, I don't really care how you feel, except I hope that you finally have realized you made a big boo-boo, a big mistake. So greetings to all of you. For everyone that watches the show, we always just say hit the red button to subscribe. And if you like the show, hit the like button. Today, and I want to say to Brother Ogawa, Sister Briscoe, and others who will be coming on, today you have the pleasure of having another discussion on economics in the Black community. And you have this lovely sister who's sitting next to me, Sister Joy Lynch. Joy, how you doing?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
Yeah, you're looking good. You look like you got some
So thank you. Thank you.
Here with us. You know what I mean? Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, really the presentation that you made a couple of weeks ago where you went into financial literacy. That was a very good discussion. And so what we want to do today is to build on that. So the topic for today is rebuilding the Black economy today. And that I think is very important given what we're going through today. So Joy Lynch is, as I revealed before, this is something that you have to reveal. Like if a show's owned by somebody, you say, the show's owned by somebody. Since we own it, we don't say that. But I have to reveal that Joy Lynch is my sister-in-law. She's the sister of my wife, Pam Hurley Tashaka. And this is quite a lady here. And so she's an economic developer and she is into financial literacy. And this is her passion. This is her drive. So when you pursue your drive in life, that's kind of like not work. Have you found that to be the case?
I absolutely agree. You know, they say when you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. So, I mean, I work though, but I will say that I do enjoy what I do. I love numbers. I love helping people, and I also just want to say thanks for having me back again. It's a pleasure. Definitely love our discussions that we have.
Yeah, your name fits you, Joy.
Thank you. Uh,
And it's
they say
no, go ahead.
I was saying, and you know, fun fact of your wife, actually, my sister is the one who came up with the name for me. So,
No,
she,
really. You
yeah,
never told me that.
yes, it was there. They got together. They didn't have a name. They were like, well, we have to name the baby, and so they got together. And my two sisters, they liked the name Joy. So here I am.
Right on.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's good. You know, good name, fits you.
thank
Um,
you.
Before getting into the show, I just wanted to deal with some current topics, um, some of which are quite uplifting. For example, 13 African countries were offered deals by Trump. And can you imagine what kind of deals those were? And they all said no, 13 of them. And that
Good
includes
to
some
know.
real big ones like South Africa, Uganda, and others. And basically, in the case of Uganda, to give you an idea of what Trump was offering, because you notice they had some saps in the White House about a week ago, African leaders, four of them, I think, and it was just disgraceful what they did, just plain disgraceful. A black reporter, a sister, she was called on by Trump, very beautiful lady, and Trump commented on her beauty. Trump hates black people, you know what I mean? But her beauty was so exceptional, he had to say that. And then he probably knew some things about her. That's why he picked her. And so, what did she say? She said, thank you for the US being involved in some mediation on the conflict in the Congo, which, by the way, the US has caused. Over 1 million people have died in the Congo over resource wars, corporations financing different groups to come in there to steal the Congo's resources, and millions of people have died. And so she made this comment, and then afterwards she said, this is about as ridiculous as it gets. Um, you should be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, Trump has been saying he should. PIECE, yes, that he's trying to take a piece of the world. Yeah, give him a prize for that. Or a piece of not memory or a piece of intelligence, give an award for that. But peace, PEACE, Trump, are you kidding? So then these leaders were all asked, and they all sheepishly agreed. Now, this was just plain pitiful, disgraceful. But these 13 African leaders, to give you an idea of what Trump is offering, is I think somebody told him that Africa has resources, because I don't think he knew that on his own. They got a lot of resources: gold, tungsten, uranium, you name it, you know? And Trump goes, oh, really? Really? I can guess that's how that went. And so then they sent these offers to 13 African countries, one of which was Uganda. And so Uganda um, gives a window into what he was telling other African countries. So they offered Uganda a few billion in aid to upgrade the technology infrastructure. And then to get control of all the information for the next 15 years. Huh? Uganda said, and Museveni is not one of my heroes. He's the president of Uganda. He is not a great person, but he had spine enough to say hell no, And then they went to Huawei, which is the big tech company in China, and got billions of dollars. So that should tell you where things are going with America's policy in Africa. So those um, 13 countries stood up and said no. I should point out that Brother Willie Mukasa Dada Ricks, who was on our show about a month or so ago, he has been in Burkina Faso, he and his wife, and they've been there now for over a week. If you recall, this is the brother who came up with the Black Power slogan on the march in Mississippi in 1966 with King, Stokely Carmichael, then later Kwame Ture, who was his buddy. He asked for Willie Ricks, a little short guy. You remember him. He's now 80 or so. And so he's been a guest of the government of Burkina Faso. He paid his own way. And so I think I reported the last time that he'd had meetings with the youth. And these were youth who are members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Burkina Faso. And you could see him there grinning and the youth grinning. Then he did a TV show with the youth. This is really good because that was a part of the focus of his visit. He had a meeting with a minister, one of the ministers of state of Burkina Faso. He and him were sitting alongside a number of NGOs, organizations, African organizations, and they were discussing the state of Africa. Then he had a meeting with the foreign minister of Burkina Faso, and then he had a meeting with the prime minister. And he and his wife met with the prime minister and his wife, which is quite an honor. It shows the respect that Burkina Faso has for not only him and people like him, but for our people as a whole. And the outcome of that meeting was Burkina Faso made Brother Mukasa Dada Ricks, him and his wife, ambassadors for Burkina Faso. Isn't that nice? He'll be on this show when he gets back. He had called to say, could he? And I said, could you? Hell yeah. This is a bad brother. He's a street cat too, you know. He didn't graduate from high school. He had the highest math scores in the southern state in which he lived. And his son, I pointed this out before, his son went to Cuba because of the revolutionary orientation of the father, got a degree in medicine, and now heads up a team of doctors that's going to Africa to train African doctors. This is one bad brother. But Burkina Faso and the countries they're aligned with, three of them are aligned, and they form one country now. They're the hub of some change going on in Africa. So we're going to have him on when he gets back, and that's going to be bad. The other good thing I want to report on is the Target boycott. I don't have all the details here. I don't have time to go into them. But on the positive side, you had a one-day boycott of Target and then an ongoing boycott. Now, what's really interesting is in one day, Black purchasing power hurt Target to the extent of $12.4 billion. Huh? One day. Not bad. Huh? And normally Blacks spend an average of 23 million daily on Target. I'm sure it's more than that. So this has had a major effect on Target because you know that this boycott is a result of Target going back on its DEI initiatives. Though it claims that it's still continuing them, they have cut them back. So Target's being given a choice. Please Trump or get hurt. And like is this was a move because I had stated on this show before this happened, the biggest thing we can do right now is economics, and a boycott would be the biggest. And within a week, and it didn't come from me. I'm not claiming anybody's listening to me. the masses of black people who are very smart, the masses of black people, we're the most unified group in this country, but most of you don't know it. I constantly get these ridiculous comments about how powerless we are. You know, do you know how to spell power? And then do you know how it works for us? We're the most unified group in this country. So if that's, and let me just point it out. 85% of black people voted against Trump. 54% of white males voted for him. So we always say all white people roll the same way. No, they don't. 85% of white people have never agreed on anything. And I'm a historian and I could give you all kinds of data to prove it. And there's one big fat reason. White people don't treat other white people good, particularly their elite messes with their masses. And so that when you have that, you're going to have division. White people stick together, my behind. World War I and World War II, was that white people sticking together? You know what I mean? Huh? So the fact that it's the masses of black people that called for this boycott instantaneously shows something about black people. We got problems. And this show doesn't romanticize us, but we've got a common culture. And that common culture, when we're angry, we go in the same direction. And if you go against this direction, you're in the category of being wrong. And I always go in the general direction of my people. Now, what our people don't know is what they can't see. And that's usually what our leaders aren't telling them that they should know, like neoliberalism that we talked about before, privatizing everything, which is really what's behind Trump's agenda. Most blacks wouldn't know what that is, but they would know the effects of it and would oppose it. So this is a big deal, and take my hat off to our people. Now, we know on the negative side, Target went into trying to split this boycott by buying off some heads of the National Baptist Convention. And they got, I think it was 700,000 or something. They got a very small piece of chump change. And then they turned around and said they're going to use this to help the black community. Yeah, by putting it in their pocket. So that was designed. That was a strategic move on Target's part because that's the largest organization of blacks in this country, the National Baptist Convention. So they figure that they can by doing that, they can confuse some blacks. I can tell you, I know how black people think. That ain't going to change a single mind among black people because the majority of those blacks who made the decision to boycott Target are Christians. And a majority of those are Baptists. You understand? And they are looking at their own self-interest. They're looking at the interests of jobs being lost to the federal government and everything else, these DEI attacks. So that's a negative. Good luck for Target on that. I'm not wishing it to them. I'm just saying that ain't going to work. The other thing is I just wanted to note some of the effects of the cuts on Medicaid, SNAP, which is the program for people poor people that need food assistance, and SSI, Supplementary Security Assistance, and Social Service Block Grants. What's happening here, and I pointed this out before, some may have not been on the show and heard it. The Republicans have passed the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of this country from the poor to the rich to also pay for a $4 trillion tax cut for the rich. Whatever's coming for everybody else is nothing. You know, the rich are getting almost all of this. And so over 20 million people are likely to lose Medicaid and Obamacare or affordable care benefits in these cuts. But the way they've done this is these cuts are not going to be felt until after the midterm elections. And most of these cuts are going to hit towards the end of Trump's presidency. And so people whose eyes are closed are not going to feel it until late. But some of these things are going to happen even before then. But that's going to be the effect. And if the next administration is Democratic, the only way they're going to be able to overturn these is to have both the House and the Senate and the presidency, which they would have to have, and the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court can come in on this and try and uphold it. So this is where this is at. And so people who said the Democrats and Republicans are the same, there's some truth in that, but basically that's street truth. That wasn't wise because under the last administration, a lot of good had been done for Blacks and poor. Your unemployment rate went from 12% to 5%. And a lot of things happened in terms of what happened in that administration. The other thing is SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits is food assistance, which is over 6 million people get these benefits. There's going to be a huge cut to SNAPs. The federal government funds SNAP to 100%. So the cuts that they are carrying out against SNAP will be sent to the states. And then they'll say, well, we didn't cut it. The states can restore it. The states operate on a balanced budget. They're not going to have the money to cover it. And some of the southern states aren't going to want to cover it. And so you're going to see a lot of people going hungry more than you have now. This is serious. There's a program called Supplementary Security Income. This is again for poor families. It's going to hurt over 100,000 poor families. And then there's social service block grants. The federal government gives a certain amount of money to the states. In 2022, it was $270 million. It's going to be substantial cuts to that. So this is designed to hurt the poor. And this is no joke, and it means Blacks will absorb a greater percentage of this than any other group other than Native Americans in this country. So that's some of the stuff on the cuts and stuff. So this is the second post-Reconstruction, and they're trying to roll back the gains that we have made in our second Reconstruction, the 50s and the 60s, and they're rolling back the gains made by Roosevelt under the New Deal. These are the two attacks. And by the way, I had a ridiculous comment on the show last week. Somebody just matter of fact said, because this was a very good show that we had with Dewey Crumpler. Anyone that missed that, they really missed something. I hope you went and watched it. A master artist, a grand master. And so in the course of that, he was talking about what was behind his art. And so someone made a comment, and the comment was, because he was talking about how his art was influenced by the Black freedom movement that the media calls the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers, African independence movements, and so forth. And then he was bringing us up to date on his art now and how neoliberalism and all of that is affecting his message in his abstract art, because he's a multidimensional artist. And so then the comment to the side was, the civil rights movement was a mistake. I didn't comment on it last week, because I usually don't comment on stuff that just makes no sense, but I have to comment on that. Saying that is like saying defeating your enemy was a mistake, because the Black freedom movement of the South instilled the greatest defeat on the movement called white supremacy, in this case, Southern apartheid, in the history of this country. And in fact, that's what Trump's program is about, trying to bring those good old days of segregation back. So saying that the civil rights, actually Black freedom movement is what we called it, was a mistake, is like saying it was a mistake to have a movement that generated a bill that overturned legal apartheid. It was a mistake to have a movement that restored the right to vote. It was a mistake to have a movement that transformed the consciousness of African people, people of color, and white students in this country, and transformed the consciousness of the world, just as the African independence movement transformed our consciousness. So I just want to make a comment that it used to be that common sense was common. For some of our people, common sense is no longer common. That's a minority of our people. By the way, I picked that up from a blind person that worked at the Y, who used to be a gangster, who then woke up, and that was his comment. You know, so not all sense is coming from, because I say there's three nets. There's the ignorant, that's the majority of people watch. That's just talk, a bunch of talk. Then there's the infonet. That's where good information comes. It doesn't matter what your race is. And then there's the Afronet. That's the African-centered stuff, right? Too many people are on the ignorant. You need to get your butts off the internet and read so you can lead. You know what I mean? Listen to stuff that makes sense, because there's a lot of good stuff on the Infonet and the Afronet. And I know a lot of you are watching it. So let's get into this show right now. And the topic is rebuilding the Black economy today. And what I wanted to do was start with a historic context for this topic today, rebuilding the Black economy today. And that historic context is important. I should point out that based on my math, and it's based on a low number in terms of the total number of Black people in this country, because the number I used was something like 47 million Black people. It's closer to 60. So I'm using the 47 million. Based on that, the total per capita income of Blacks, or the gross domestic income of Blacks, is $2,780,000,078. That's a 2 trillion. That's a big number. And in terms of the world, it puts you high up in terms of the incomes of the world. We know we're undeveloped people, and we know our incomes as a people are way below that of whites. The average income of the Black household is $56,490. The average white household income is $84,630, right? And that's due to internal colonialism. This system is set up to keep you underdeveloped. So if anybody thinks we're doing this show to tell you how to get rich quick and free Black people from poverty by just the things we're offering, no, you're going to have to change the system. So if you think that the get rich quick things that have worked for a few people is going to work for you, no. But what Joy was presenting a few weeks ago were strategies for you to do the best with what you have, and in many cases prosper, right? But that's against all the odds. But guess what? You can beat the odds unless you're average. If you don't see yourself as average, you can beat the odds. So again, don't be like some people who say that we can't do this or this is bunk. She gave basic things you should do to get your finances in order so that you're not flat on your behind. And even though there's a system against you, you can do something to live better, but we have to change the system because this is a system designed to underdevelop us as it underdevelops Africa. Has underdeveloped Asia, much of Latin America, and the Caribbean. And each of these places, people are doing things to change their conditions. And I want to say this: we will not change the economic development of our people until we see ourselves appropriately, not just as individuals, but as a nation within a nation. We are a nation within a nation. What is that? A nation is a people with a common culture. What's the difference between the nation of African Americans and, say, the nation of Africans in Jamaica? The Africans in Jamaica are not only a nation, they are a state. That means they have a government. We don't have a government. That's not good, and that can be good. See, everything that's negative has a positive. The good thing about not having a government is you ain't got nothing controlling you. The bad thing about having a government is that you don't have a lot of the instruments of power that governments have. But that's only good if those powers are used in your advantage, right? So I'm just saying, I'll spend time at other shows talking about national consciousness. We are a nation within a nation. Some of us are conscious of it and some are not. Most are not. So we need to understand that because we act like a nation within a nation when we do a boycott like Target. There was no Congress that met, the people met. And there was no assembly, and they all did the same thing. That's better than the Congress, huh? That's the Congress of the people. And I'm always waiting for my people. When things get hard and I ain't got the answer, I'm looking to my people. My people woke me up. Every day, Black people that didn't know they were Africans were more African than a lot of the Africans on the continent and didn't know it. And they woke me up. People who would talk about I ain't educated and then would tell me more than I ever knew. You know what I mean? Huh? So we're getting into this topic. So putting this into a context of the day, we're in the second post-Reconstruction today, starting in '68 when Nixon came into office. And there's been an attempt to roll back the gains of our movement. It's comparable to what happened in 1876 when the election of Hayes and Tilden, it went to the House and they gave it to Hayes on condition that he withdraw federal troops, put 2 whites on the Supreme Court, and they roll back the voting right gains of Reconstruction and any others and put us in a new slavery. And this is what they're trying to do now. You better understand this. They're trying to put you back on a different kind of plantation. So one of the things that's important to understand is, so we're in a similar condition as in the 1876 period. But what's different, because a lot of us will conclude, because we're going to go back and look at some of the things we did, but some of us will conclude that's all we need to do. Like some Blacks are now concluding that based on the fact that we lost this last election with Trump, and a lot of it was based on theft, because he won by 2,300,000. And I think we can show just the voter suppression laws that passed coming from the Supreme Court, cutting out the enforcement provisions of the Voter Rights Act made a difference. And there were a lot of other things. But the key point is some of us, I've heard Blacks say, well, yeah, we need to rebuild our communities and we need to build up economic development, and that's it. And of course, they say we need to be prepared to defend ourselves, which is very important. But Blacks in the 1870s took a recourse to Reconstruction's end by going almost exclusively in the South into economic development. And that was a necessary move because there was no other move to make. You didn't have the vote. You couldn't use it. And so economics was the sole thing that they moved on, with a little bit of politics that was left, very little in the South. But today, when we talk about how do we move to rebuild Black communities, we need to understand the power dynamics have shifted in the world. At that time, America was a rising power and they supremely controlled the United States. Now America's in decline and there are rising powers throughout the world. And our power inside of this country is one of them. We put Trump out of the White House in 2020. That movement, the Black Lives Matter, that the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor movement, the stuff around COVID, all of that angered people. And we were the cutting edge that took him out. And Biden's agenda was ours. And a lot of blacks who didn't follow Biden and followed the internet that the Democrats and Republicans are the same and all of this stuff, using it not to vote or to vote in some cases for Trump. Very small percentage of blacks did, but some did more than before. That was based on a false reading. You are actually having a major say-so in what went down at this time. And I won't go into all the details of that. People who are well informed know it. So the point I'm making is that as we go back and look at what we did in the 1870s, 90s, the 20s, and so forth, we should realize this is a different time now. There's probably close to 60 million black people in this country. Anything they think they can roll back, well, it can only go so far. They can't take your whole vote, for example. They can't do that. But they're going to do everything to cut it around the edges. And it's the same thing with everything else that we've got. Cut it around the edges. And who knows what their long range objective of this is. So we have to roll up our sleeves and deal with some hard work in our community. So I do this show, but I'm an organizer. And at this point, I'm offering stuff and learning from people who are doing stuff. And if you're not doing stuff in your community, you're wasting your time. Because if you think that praying alone is going to save you or hiding your head in the sand, I know some people that don't want to hear anything about what Trump is doing because it is so miserable. Yeah, well, you close your eyes and see what happens. So hopefully people are doing some stuff. I know that some who watch this show are. I know many in our community are. So at this point, we have many options, political, not just the system, but in our communities, rebuilding our families, rebuilding communities on many different levels. The success of Barbara Lee here in Oakland was a big victory. And Barbara Lee is best person that was in Congress over probably the last 20 years, the only person to stand up against both the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And she beat off a heavy money challenge and came in with 52% of the vote. And she's doing all kinds of stuff at the local level, working with community groups. And she's sending out stuff constantly on the work that she's doing. So that's a gain. But in terms of general organizing, we've got work in terms of rolling up our sleeves and rebuilding power in our communities. So in terms of looking at what we did from the past that we can learn from now, one of the biggest moves that we made was the formation of Black Wall Streets. There were many, but the one in Oklahoma was a particularly important one. Joy, you want to give a little recap on what blacks were doing in Oklahoma in terms of building a Black Wall Street? Your sound is off.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Shaka. Black Wall Street, it refers to a striving African-American business district in Tulsa, Oklahoma during the early 1900s. At its peak, Greenwood was one of the wealthiest Black communities in the United States. There were over 300 Black-owned businesses, and including banks, hotels, doctors' offices, theaters, grocery stores. and it was home to many successful entrepreneurs, professionals, and working class families. It was a symbol of Black excellence and self sufficiency and economic power. And which was not an easy task because this was during a time of intense racial segregation. As a matter of fact, in 1921, there was a race massacre, and it was fueled by racism and false accusations. Allegedly, a white mob attacked Greenwood, and they looted and burned homes and businesses and killed about up to 300 Black residents. And much property was destroyed, and people were displaced. And according to some, generational Black wealth was wiped out overnight. But despite that, they rebuilt. But it still remains one of the most violent and underreported acts of racial terrorism in U.S. history. But it still matters, because it is, as I said, a symbol of and a powerful lesson and about legacy and coming together. And it reminds us that Black communities can build and that we can overcome. So rebuilding Black Wall Street is something that we is a constant, not even as a large thought, but just amongst ourselves, thinking about our own entrepreneurship and building and creating wealth for in our communities.
It really shows the mindset of Blacks coming right out of slavery, that they had this kind of idea of coming together and building whole communities, and we had the numbers that would have been a movement to build a nation right there. I mean, had we been in the Jamaican or the Barbadian or any of the Caribbean situations or any African situation where you're the majority on the land, then you wouldn't be talking about just building a city. You'd be talking about building states, and you'd be talking about building the whole country. So this is telling you that a lot of our views about slavery and the damage it did to our people, we need to revisit them, because while it did do damage, we also came out with our humanity intact and with a lot of vision and a lot of dignity, a lot of pride. And, this is saying a lot. So in addition to that, the Black Wall Street, there were many of them. There were over 50 that organized in different parts of the South. Some of it was the Oklahoma territories, others Kansas, and in other areas. And what's interesting is that these Black towns, in the case of in Oklahoma, where you had Indian territory, remember that Blacks and Native Americans had fought in Florida under with the Seminoles and scored the only successful slavery bill, and Native Americans the only successful victorious war against the United States. And then when they finally decided to migrate Native Americans, many of them to Oklahoma, some Blacks, I pointed this out in a much earlier show. This is not in most history books. A large number of those Africans who made up a part of the armies that fought the federal government successfully, they went to Mexico. And the Mexican government gave them land, which was strategic, right on the border between Texas and Mexico. And what ended up happening is the Texas legislature, which by then they had stolen Mexico from Texas from Mexico to maintain slavery, whereas the Mexicans had freed their slaves. The Texas legislature sent two armies against the Blacks. The Blacks destroyed both of them. You don't know anything about that in your history. I know you don't. I got that when I was sharing a platform with the brother that gave me this information. So then those blacks that went to Oklahoma, for example, some of them um, ended up getting land in Oklahoma. And what ended up happening is Native Americans and Africans who got land side by side so they could support each other. You do not want to be next to white people who are going to try and repress you. So that's a little piece of stuff that you don't know. And there was a piece of farming going on in both communities. So that was one thing. But all of these communities that formed, just like Black Wall Street, built businesses, churches, schools, um, newspapers, and so forth. And in the case of Oklahoma, where they built up newspapers, those newspapers were used to recruit blacks to come into these all black cities. And so what ends up happening in 1889, there's a land run in Oklahoma because they're opening up land. And there's a man named E.P. McCabe, who was a state auditor of Kansas, and he encourages blacks to come to these towns, and he establishes the Langston City Herald. And so there's this move. And some had the view in Oklahoma of wanting to have Oklahoma be a black state. Did you all know that? So even when we were a minority, we were thinking like a majority. And when we think of ourselves as a nation within a nation, that's how we need to think today. One of the reasons for black towns was they were free spaces. You could be among your own people. You didn't have to worry about someone shooting you, someone stealing your stuff. You didn't have to worry about segregation. These were free spaces. And this was the main reason for establishing these Black Wall Streets. So African American historian Arthur Tolson has made the point blacks who formed these communities had an ideology of self-help, racial solidarity, and black pride. These were blacks that believed that blacks should lead blacks. And I pointed out in one of the early shows in one of the slave narratives, and these are things that you very rarely find in the slave narratives. One enslaved African made this comment. He said this: only the blacks can lead the blacks. That again, if you know black people, you know that. There's been no major mass movements in this country that blacks have been a part of led by whites, major. You can't show me one. And don't talk about Jim Jones. That's not major. So that's because blacks have the philosophy of person, it was actually my first wife's father, said this: can't trust a white person behind a toothpick. That's the philosophy of most black people. They know better than to be putting their fates in the hands of white people. So as a result, this all black town movement, or movements to at least the desire to see black people run a state, and later that's why Garvey got so much support to go to Africa and run societies of our own in Africa. This comes from that view. And that's a view that is very strong among blacks to this day, contrary to popular opinion. So you had a number of towns that were set up in Oklahoma territory, such as Cimarron City, Bailey, Zion, Emmanuel, Adora, Douglas, a town called Boley, which is one that still survives today, Brooksville, Clearview, and a whole bunch of others. So these were moves by blacks that occurred across the country and also to Canada. Some blacks moved to Canada and formed largely black communities in different parts of Canada. What ends up being a problem for these black towns is when the Depression occurs. It's not just that they're attacked, and a number of them were attacked, but when the Depression occurs, it's hard for blacks to get any kind of capital to get loans to build businesses and stuff like that. So that made it difficult. But the point is, the Black Wall Streets in all black towns provide some models for what we have to do in terms of rebuilding black communities right now. And there are over 70 predominantly black communities right now with over 70% blacks, and some of them as much as 90% blacks. Ferguson is one of them. And so if you want to know how that whole movement that gives birth to Black Lives Matter came about, it was largely compact black community consciousness that produced that, you know. So the other thing I wanted to deal with is there was a movement that occurs in the South called the Exodusters movement, Exodusters.
Okay.
And as a sister, Nell Irvin Painter, Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, who's written an excellent book called The Exodusters. And by the way, she was a UC Berkeley student at the time I was leading the San Francisco Freedom Movement and took part in the biggest campaign for jobs in the history of the Black Freedom Movement, north to south, against the Bank of America. And I asked her, did you take part in that? Yeah. But she wrote she's an excellent historian, retired from Yale, and this book on the Exodusters. So one of the people that she featured in the Exodusters was a man named Pop Singleton. And Pop Singleton was a leader of the movement to get blacks to go to Kansas. And this was an important movement at that time. And I want to just describe what he accomplished. Basically, at the end of the Civil War, you had Civil War veterans Black Civil War veterans who went back into their communities and organized Black people. And what they did is encourage them. One, they taught them literacy, how to read and write, encouraged them to vote during Reconstruction, and helped them build organizations in Black communities. And many of them faced repression because there was the effort to prevent these leaders from communicating with the masses of Black people. And so many of them were driven into urban areas away from their base, but others were able to stay. And this is one, Pop Singleton, P-A-P Singleton. Singleton was a charismatic, prophetic, religious leader, but he was a person who loved Black people. And basically, what he encouraged Black people to do was to leave the South and to go to Kansas. So in addition to Oklahoma, there was a drive for Kansas. And Kansas was popular with a lot of Blacks because anti-slavery agitation had occurred during the period of enslavement. And so they saw this as a place where they could possibly build some power. And so a major movement was organized, and thousands of Black people moved into Kansas. Now, it wasn't all peaches and cream, but what it did do was build another base for Black people. And as a result, improved the lives of some Black people, you know. Now, this Black here also picture of people in that community during that time.
The sound is not great on this.
So it's not sound, just people showing you some of the small film actually. Different kinds of businesses. People had different kinds of things to have. The young people discovered Anderson of this show, 50 minutes getting part of the Black Wall Street archive collection. So this is part of the pride that our people have and sense of economic power and development. The final thing I want to go into before Joy gets into the main topic of how to set up a business and share some of our own experiences about this is the role of secret societies in this economic development. This is something that is generally missed by Blacks today. In fact, and I've covered this before in a previous show, but not this particular feature that I'm going to cover here, secret societies. There is the common narrative, and I see some people saying you can't hear my narrative right now, or you couldn't hear the narrative on the film. The film was just, it was a rough film to show you what was going on. A Black person took those pictures. So this is not, that was not the purpose of the film. There's an assumption that we lost our culture in slavery. That's a big popular assumption. There's no backup for that. Yes, our culture was attacked. Yes, there was erosion. And yes, also, there was the development of new elements in the culture, but there was also a continuation of many features of African culture. And in fact, as Zora Neale Hurston said, the closer you get to slavery, the more African we are. So that would tell you that what's going on in slavery is heavily African. In the Caribbean, it's obvious because it's 90% of the people on those islands. But here, 3 of the states in the South, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina, is majority Africans. But the majority of plantations in the United States were large plantations, huge presence of Africans. And the Europeans running these plantations didn't know 2 cents about African culture anyway. So this Willie Lynch stuff that Farrakhan got spooked into talking about, that Manu Ampin dispelled in a book showing that it was bull. It was, Willie Lynch waved a wand and suddenly we became white. We ain't white yet, huh? So we brought a lot of Africa here, and then we added to it, and we created this new African culture that has got an African foundation. And one of the key foundations was secret societies. In fact, it was, of all the organizations we had, the most important, along with the diviners, who were, the natural leaders on plantations. They were the priests who told you your future. And they were the ones that formed the Black church after slavery. That's a whole nother discussion. So I just want to quote from Carter G. Woodson's book, African Background Outline. This is a book that most of us haven't read. Most of us who've read Carter G. Woodson have read his book, Miseducation of the Negro, which is a great book. But this book was the follow-up to give you what this miseducation should be replaced by. And it's an unusual book in the way it's written. And so he makes this comment on secret societies. He said, certain aspects of African social order may still be observed here among Blacks in this country. I'm adding that. The emphasis placed by Negroes on secret societies in Africa has survived here to evade or cover up anything undesirable or to take advantage of those that thus connected to provide for the community certain facilities for social outlet which could be otherwise afforded. So he's saying that the secret societies that were carried from Africa to the America, to the Caribbean, to South America, but he's talking about the United States here, its main purpose was the same purpose it was in Africa, to serve social needs of the people. And then he goes on to list a number of these secret societies, and I researched them, and in my book that's coming forth on Seba and Sodaya, I cover some of these in these. And he talks about the difference between the secret societies in Africa and what Blacks end up, in some cases, adopting through the Masons and stuff like that. But when Blacks took on the Masons, they did it in an African way, whereas the white Masons did a lot in terms of parades and rituals and social gatherings. The main thing, and Blacks did some of that, but they had rituals of initiation, of degrees of masters and stuff like that. And they also had services for Black people. And that was the main purpose of the secret societies in the United States. I had made the point before when I covered this in previous show that secret societies in Africa, these were created to counter the effort by colonialism to destroy African culture. So secret societies were built so that the culture could be preserved. And they were the initiation centers for boys and girls and to manhood and girlhood. So girls and boys were told, you're going to die when you're initiated into secret societies. They thought literal death. No, they were going to die as boys and become men, die as girls and become women. And they were being trained by elder men who had been warriors and now wise people. They were trained by elder women who had been mothers and grandfathers. This is the educational system of Africa. That was what Per Ankh, the House of Life in ancient Kemet, was based on, the secret societies. The secret societies trained you in everything, including warfare. The secret society Per Ankh in Kemet trained you in everything except warfare, because the pharaoh trained the warriors, you know? So the African who came to America was very difficult to handle for many reasons. The main one, he came from, and she came from, a twin lineal culture of male, female, equal empowerment, where everybody was free. That's the key thing. But the other one is they went through secret societies. They were rough and tough. And I understand, Joy, your father was rough and tough. Is that right? Your sound is off. Your sound is off. Joy.
That is one way to describe him, yes.
He took no mess. You understand?
He did
that
not.
Was the average African in enslavement, but that's not the picture you get. Huh? The average one was tough. And if you recall, when Dewey Crumpler was doing his thing last week, and he had this scarified Black man who had all these scars on his back, he read into it things that it would take a very sensitive person to get. And this was a resistant African. His back had been scarred so many times that that's all his back was scars. And he was saying, hell, I'm not taking this. I pointed out before, the enslaved African carried himself in such a way that white observers of plantation slavery said they carried themselves with nobility. Huh? My wife has a saying that comes from the Caribbean, poor great. The average poor person in the Caribbean is like the average poor black person in this country. They carry themselves like they're great because they are. Yeah, greatness ain't based on money, but it's based on character, based on values, based on manhood. You understand? Huh? So the secret societies were the building blocks for black businesses, the black Wall Streets, and everything else we did, building black communities. And the one I just want to briefly focus on is the secret society, because the ones that usually are not studied are the ones that were not associated with the Masons and the Elks and stuff. And that's fine because those were also subverted, and Africans who were in them, they operated them as African secret societies serving our people. But the ones that are often not studied are the ones that were completely financed by blacks. And, these were the ones that were most important. So one of the important secret societies, the one I just want to briefly focus on here, that played a big role in financing and building the black economy, is a secret society called the Mosaic Templars of America, MOSAIC, Templars of America. And this is a organization that was founded in Little Rock, Arkansas, Pulaski County in 1882. So this is at the very beginning of post-Reconstruction, where everything is being taken back from blacks. And the two founders were a brother named John Edward Bush and Chester W. Keats. And these two were the founders. And so what ends up happening with this organization, which is a secret society organization, it's formed out of African culture, which again, we carried and continued in America. And one of the most important features of African culture is life after death. There's a real concern that when you pass to the next world, you're taken care of right, buried right. Huh? And all over, that's a part of African American culture. And so the Mosaic Templars of America started off by offering burial insurance and then operating as an insurance company. And so at its peak in the 1920s, it had 100,000 members. It had chapters in 26 states, the Caribbean, and South and Central America. And they had a chapter in Barbados, by the way.
Interesting.
And they were headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. And they ended up buying a building, tearing it down, and building a huge building that took care of the business of this organization. They, in addition to having a business that provided burial insurance and insurance in general, they built a hospital. They also had a nursing school, and they had a newspaper. And these two guys were John Edward Bush, an ex-slave, and Chester Keats. They were good friends, Keatts. Bush, his mother died when he was 6 years old. He was left homeless, living in the streets, do what he could to survive, cook, sew, do whatever he could. But he got into school, got him a high school diploma, and was the valedictorian of his class. And then what he began to do was accumulate money. And by the end of his life, he was worth $50,000. Now, $50,000 then would be millions of dollars now. He owned his own farm, and he had one of the loveliest sisters in town who came from a family that was very important. And no one thought that he deserved to marry her except her, because she knew a good black man when she saw one. She said, I married him and just sat on the porch and enjoyed myself. And she was the key to his success because she was one strong black woman. So this is a man who for 16 years, in addition to founding the Mosaic Templars of America, was in charge of the Land and Deed Office in Arkansas. That was a appointment of the Republican Party. He was the last black person to hold an office at the end of Reconstruction. And that was because he was so smart. He was so smart. But what did he do? He used that land office to give black people information on the best land to buy. And so to this day, in the area in which he was from, blacks still own some of the best land. But the key point is, this society was a society that had different sections. They had a section that dealt with just life expectancy and everything else and kept track of that. And then they had various other sections that managed the money that came in to this organization. And it was well managed. And so this organization was like a takeoff that gave support to a lot of other businesses. And when Mr. Bush became ill, his son took over. And then the son after that. And his buddy before that, they ran this together. So this is an example of one of the ways in which secret societies worked. Joy, you as a child had some experience with secret societies with your father. You want to say anything about the effect of secret societies on you?
Well, my dad was a Mason, and he also was a member of the Rosicrucian Order. And what I can say, a lot of it I didn't understand as a kid, but I do know that there was a certain amount of unity and community that my father did get from his, being a part of the lodge, which I think is one of the benefits of the secret societies, particularly the Black secret societies, about preserving, our heritage, our culture, our education. So I definitely learned that, seeing that from my dad, as well as there are some levels of education, some things of higher learning that I wasn't really privy to, but understanding that there is this high level of education that is available to us if we are willing to look for it. It's not readily out there, but if you want to find, want to educate yourself on certain things, there are ways that can be done. And the other thing that I can say about it is that I know that part of their doctrine is also taking care of families after, say, the member passes. So it's kind of like an economic way to strengthen our homes, to keep the families going, say, like when the provider is gone. So I mean, there are definitely some things that I saw in it that I found to be great for me, not just as even just as Black, but just as a person in general, understanding that there is education out there, and is having a sense of belonging is important, very important. I've come to find out even more so as I've grown up.
Yeah, the oldest organizations I pointed out before among Blacks in this country are the secret societies. They're the oldest. And one reason is they're all encompassing, just as they were in Africa. So they deal with the spiritual, they deal with the financial, they deal with the personal, they deal with the moral integrity of the person, that you have to be a good human being.
That is
They're
right.
basically the same as what you had in Africa. So this is long lasting, and this is often underestimated when you look at this today. Marcus Garvey, his movement comes up at the time of all of this ferment among blacks, particularly in the South. And a feature of the Garvey movement that's often missed is it was a fraternal organization as well. And so when you see people marching with uniforms and stuff like that, that's also a expression of this old secret society system, you know. And but the emphasis on you being a righteous and good person, and that was the thing about Bush and his friend who founded the Templars. The most important thing they said about him was his good character.
Yeah, I do remember that they would have to, particularly they had to come to our home and meet his family, and and I remember my father telling me, make sure and be on your best behavior. So, because they did want to see that you were a family man and had good moral value, as you mentioned. So it's not something that is just there for everyone to join. You had to, there is a certain standard involved.
Yeah. And there were degrees of initiation. These are the same that you find or similar to what you find among the Dogon, the Yoruba, various systems. As you grow, you go to different levels. And with that, there's heavier moral, social, political, family responsibilities and responsibilities in the community. So I would say this that for us, more of us need to revisit secret societies, you know, not just in terms of the Masons and the Elks, but that's one among blacks, but in other ways as well. That's a
They do.
formation. Yeah, go
They
ahead.
offer, they do offer us, sense of community, identity, and loyalty that sometimes help, particularly with blacks, that helps us in a society that's often hostile and exclusionary.
Yeah,
They provide scholarships and training, financial support, as I mentioned. So there come people, as I mentioned to you, people tend to disavow what they don't understand, but sometimes there is value in these in societies. And I think it's great. I guess I can see the parallel of why you brought the two, this as well as Black Wall Street, because that is, I guess, would be considered somewhat of secret society. I guess the concept was the same. It's about empowerment and opportunity, um, and keeping, like circulating our dollars amongst ourselves and creating jobs for each other. I think those are some of the greatest things, the values that would have come out of something like Black Wall Street and any secret society.
yeah, yeah, very important. So that's part of what we have to draw from. So now we're going to get into the main point of this show, and which is economic development and rebuilding the Black economy. And so, Joy, it's yours. And if you have, do you have any slides or anything you want to use in this presentation?
Oh, not today, no. But yeah, no, not today. But I
So
can
it's
continue.
yours. It's
Okay.
yours. Get into this is very important stuff that we need to master. So go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, because I mean, small businesses, are more than just a place to shop. They're anchors of our culture and our community, and provide obviously economic opportunity. And especially for our communities, supporting Black-owned businesses isn't. It's not just about spending money. It's about, as I mentioned, circulating our money power and reclaiming ownership and building that generational wealth. Black-owned businesses, they play a crucial role in our in our economies, with creating jobs and providing goods and services. You know, every storefront, every business, every receipt is like a declaration that we belong here, that that we are part of the whole greater scheme of things. Um, when they offer more than just products, it's a vision. You know, a lemonade stand, a juice bar, a boutique, a bookstore. They all carry a weight of legacy and promise that there's greater things to come. You know, when you support a Black-owned business in particular, you're not just buying a product; you're investing in someone's dream. So Black small business is extremely important to our communities, and especially keeping, as I said, keeping those dollars circulating. Your work helping someone pay their rent, helping to send the kid to college, and then we want to have that decision making for ourselves. One of the best things I think I did was become forming a small business for myself. I think it was the education I've learned and from it, and economically, it's helped me to be able to control my dollars. You know, you might not understand that because sometimes it's tough knowing it's cyclical. Like sometimes money you get a lot, your business does well, sometimes it doesn't. So, but you still have more control of how you're spending your money and more power over what you can control your own destiny, I think, more as a small business. So I definitely encourage people to consider it. It's not easy, but I do think that working for myself is has been a bigger reward than I could have gotten from working for anyone else. So um, entrepreneurship, it's a tool of resilience and regeneration and creating our own tables, so so that we have a seat at our own tables, and I think that is the biggest thing. So um I would say one of the first things, when you're starting want to start a business, so say you want to start a business, you want to start with passion. You got to have a passion for something. You mentioned at the top of earlier in the show, if do what you love, you never work a day. That I think is the first step. Finding out, what do you love? What problems can you help in your community? Um, our real life experiences are sources of inspiration for business ideas, and that can create meaningful impact. Maybe you're a great problem solver, or you organize events, or you like cooking for the block, or braiding hair in your kitchen. All of that has value. The saying is, start where your heart meets a need. So I think one of the biggest things is to find out what is a need in your business, in your neighborhood, in your community, and see if you can provide that need to to them. I think, going back to Black Wall Street, it probably was born for that love of your community, and so that's, I think, where we can start. I would say the next step in starting a business was to validate your idea. So talk to your people, ask around, ask them, is this something you would buy or is it would use? You think someone will pay for it? And start small. Take your idea and host it at a pop-up table at your church or a local fair, or post for test it out on social media. you know um, you'll never have the perfect conditions, but that's why it's important to test your idea and then adjust accordingly to the feedback that you get. um, and then once you have your idea, I would say the next thing was to create like a simple plan. So we always hear about the business plan, and I think I'm a big believer in it. It is important that you write down your ideas, put it on paper. Not only is it help you to organize your ideas, but it's a kind of will be a roadmap for you as you go forward. Because in the you know You get caught up running your business and making your products and setting your prices. Sometimes you might forget, you lose your vision. You can always go back to that business plan and take a look at it and see, okay, well, this was where we were. This was what we had in mind. And again, it's not written in stone. So if you need to adjust, that's a good time to go back and look at it and say, okay, well, we had this idea, but we're going to need to, due to whatever reasons, we may need to adapt and change this a bit to suit the conditions that are present. So, and you don't need a whole 50-page business plan. You can start with 4 key questions. You can say, what am I going to sell? And who am I selling it to? And what do I need to get started? And then the price and what it's going to cost. Those are, those are the good places to start basic things to get your idea going. And in my book, Jailer's Juice Bar, some of these concepts I kind of break down for kids so that, kind of that kids can understand, but it's not just for kids. It's these theories work for grown-ups too. This is the basic steps. So if you ever want to take a look at that, you can pick it up and see. I would say the next step after you have got your plan, you've got everything written down, you've worked on your products and your pricing, and definitely there's a whole formula that you should think about when it comes to working out your pricing, because you want to make sure that you're pricing your product so that you make a profit, right? So that's where it's important to have a plan, write down what it's going to cost, all your expenses, to know that once you sell your product, you can still cover costs and maybe make a profit for yourself as well as to reinvest in your business, because that's important. Next after that, I would say, is you can register your business. You choose your business name and can decide on a business structure. This is one of the first and most important decisions you're going to make, is choosing your right business structure. So I think this is important because your decision is going to affect everything from your taxes to liability to your ability to raise money for your business. Different structures have different tax consequences. So what's going to work for your one business may not work for yours. And when I talk about business structure, I'm talking about whether you're going to be a sole proprietor, LLC, a corporation. These are some of the different business structures. So I would say before choosing a structure, it's always smart to talk with an accountant or your tax professional, because as I mentioned, the structure does have an effect on your taxes, right? And so after you've decided on this is the best time here now to apply for your EIN, which is what they call the employer's identification number, or your tax ID number. And you can apply for that right on the IRS website, and it's free. So I know sometimes I've heard people tell me that somebody charged them for an EIN number. It's free. Okay, you can do it yourself on the IRS website. So you also, and this is a real pro tip, make sure once you apply for that EIN, you keep that paper that they send to you, because they don't issue you another one. And so you want to keep that number, because this is how you're going to need that number to open your business bank account, to get loans, to run a payroll. It's like your business social security number. So you're going to need that number. This is how you're going to legitimize your business and protect your legacy. So this is key. Next, as I mentioned, opening that business bank account. And one of the biggest mistakes I see new business owners make is combining business and personal finances. It may seem convenient, but it can cause serious problems down the line. So, including tax headaches, you're going to have incorrect bookkeeping, liability risk, and just basically not knowing what is your business money and what belongs to you personally. So I would say once you have that EIN number and you take the paper that you got, take that to the bank, open that business account, and set up a separate business checking account to track your sales and expenses, and also to help start building business credit, which is key, because these are the things that may help you later on further down to help buy equipment, cover payroll, expand. So the like it's like a house when you need to build a strong foundation so that the structure lasts. If your foundation isn't strong, so it's good to do these things and do them right in the very beginning so that you don't have any issues later on. And you can go to your local bank or credit union, or they have online banks, that have online services. Chase is a very good bank, Blue Vine, and open your business checking account in your business name. Yeah. Um, Another important step in the beginning, I would say, is to start once you have all your paperwork in place and you know your products and services. You want to start building your brand, um, and start marketing. Figure out who you're going to be marketing, who's your ideal customer, um, and how do they relate to your story. Remember, your story is your superpower, so that is that makes you unique, because no one else has your story. So if you can build that within your brand, people love uniqueness, people love authenticity. So, be as authentic as you can in your story. Build your brand. This is what makes your business you. Use and then you in terms of starting your marketing, use what you have, word of mouth, social media, church events, even text messages, anything to get the word out about your business, um, is important, because if no one knows, your business goes nowhere. So have a plan. Part of your one of the important step, I think, when you're forming your business plan is to think about how you are going to market your product or services, um, and come up with a plan to and implement it. And again, I go back to my favorite word, adjust. If this doesn't work, you test your metrics, you see what's working for you today, may not work for you in 6 months or a year from now. So, um, and when you're starting out, it's easy to think that you need this big budget or fancy branding. But the greatest marketing tool is you, and it's all about how you get your story out, your story, your journey, your passion, your purpose. That's what draws people in. That's what helps people connect and believe in what you're building. So make sure and believe, do something you love, believe in it, and use what you have and keep going. Never give up, I think, is a good saying when you're starting a business. I know I started mine in 2009, and it's been, I would say, there's ups and downs. As a business owner, every day is a different day. So be prepared to work hard. You may work harder than you do when you work a 9 to 5, because as a business owner, all the decisions come to you. But again, I think there's something fulfilling in that. So do what you love, and get it out there. Word of mouth is still powerful, and work. You don't have to start yourself. You're solving to solve a problem. Tell people what you need, what your product would need that it meets, what problem it solves. These are the things that you want to get out to the folks. I would say also another pro tip is to keep good business records, and learn your numbers. You need to track every dollar coming in and coming out. How you do that is up to you. As your business grows, you can start with a simple spreadsheet, pen and paper. It still works, but of course they have tons of apps out there that help you with business, with budgeting. and keeping tracking your money, um, hire a bookkeeper. Some people think that they don't want to spend that money on a bookkeeper, but I will tell you from experience for all the years that I've worked in accounting and bookkeeping, in that you wind up spending more money by not hiring that bookkeeper when you don't know where your money is. And if you're not keeping track of your money, first of all, you don't know how well your business is doing. And if you can't pull a financial statement for your business, then you won't be eligible for grants and loans and funding. So this is why tracking is most important. Use an accounting software. There's tons of them out there, and ones that works for you, as I said, or hire a professional that can help you keep track of all of this. Because don't wait for tax season to try to figure it all out, because this is where we lose money. So you want to understand the numbers of your business. That is honestly the reason why I became an accountant. My one of my sisters, my other sister, Carol, she's an accountant, and I thought that was a pretty great thing to be. But the main one of the other reasons was that I always knew I wanted to be a business owner, and I figured that I wanted to be able to understand my numbers and my money, because I had heard stories about people who have um, trusted their accountant to handle all their finances, and then their accountant screws them, or they can't find them, or just being able to be a part of the conversation when it comes to your money, your business. So I think it's important, I to know at least the basics. And if it's too much, because I know some people are just not numbers people, I meet them all the time, at least have someone that can explain it to you in a way that is understandable for you. Be able to meet you where you are in terms of your understanding when it comes to your numbers, because in the end, it's up to you, to know all about your business. And then I think a point that I would love to, think is important to bring out is talking about funding your business. Because obviously, when you're starting a business, you need money. You know, there's definitely, you don't need a bank loan to start. I advise you to start where you are. So use personal savings, or if you have a side hustle, use that money to put towards your business. Ask family and friends who believe in you. Some people want to invest in your business, or even just give you because they believe in you. So I would start with there. There's also micro loans and community funding programs. I'm sure, Shaka, you know of these programs where they help people with their small businesses. And they have grants. There's tons of grants. There's grants for women, for Black women, for minorities. There's all types, and there's local business incentives that helps local businesses start out. So there's ways, crowdfunding. There's these things called pitch competitions, something like a Shark Tank. They do have them that are available that can raise awareness and funds. And then of course there are those bank loans and investors, but obviously you want to be careful especially with those shark investors that are, because the money once you borrow money, you have to pay it back. So again, obviously, don't bite off more than you can chew, but there's different ways of funding your business. So that, it's important, again, to have your numbers intact. You need those reports. Good records gives you a better chance of getting funded. And so just basically, as a recap, I want to tell you that you can start with what you have. Don't wait for funding to be perfect. Start now. Today is the best day to start. Build a community. It's not about competition, and although it's about where you want to be. So, collaboration versus ego. Reinvest in yourself. reinvest in your communities, hire local. You can mentor youth, and I think another thing that I think is most important for small businesses is to give back to your communities, whether it is to have a local giveaway, raise money for another small business, give away stuff to your community. Giving back to your community is what it's all about, right? This is why we want to invest in our communities so that we pay it forward. You know, Black entrepreneurship, it is legacy work. It's how we're going to close that wealth gap, reclaim power, and write new narratives. So whether it's a corner store or an online boutique, your idea matters.
Very good. I hope people got that. I think you started with passion, which I think is real important with whatever you do. If you don't have the drive for it, then nothing else is going to work.
That's right.
Yeah. In business, usually in the first year, what's generally the cycle in business development, like in the first couple of years? What usually happens with the average small business in terms of profit and loss? You know,
I mean, it does sometimes take a business a few years to make a profit. Those first years, it's usually about building, starting out, like getting your location if you're going to be a brick and mortar business. Building out, getting to know your customers, getting to know your market, and all the things that go along with it. Um, just the persistence and drive. And again, I do think a lot of businesses where they run into trouble again is not knowing where their numbers. They don't know if they're making a profit. I think one of the things I see people do in general is that they tend to look at the money coming in, but they're not looking at the money going out, the expense. Things cost, everything costs, as we know. And so it may look like, wow, we're making all of this big money, but how much is it costing you to make that money is where you need to be focusing on. So your profit and loss is a statement to me is one of the most vital tools for a small business owner, particularly in those early days. Because if your books are being kept correctly, it shows you a snapshot of like, how much money you're making versus how much money you're spending and what you're spending it on. So I think it's most important to look at those things, especially again, in any years, but especially in those first years, because you want to know if this business is profitable and if it has longevity.
My look at Black businesses is the overwhelming majority of Black businesses are owned by one person and employ only one person. What's the cause of that, and how can people get around that to build something that obviously you're going to have to generate an income so you can have a larger employee staff that can generate more business for you? What's the
Right. I
cause?
mean, I think the first cost is cost. It costs you to pay people to run your business. And I think, again, going back to not knowing your numbers makes you not know if you can afford to expand, if you can afford to hire someone else. So I do think that, you know, finances are a big part of that equation of reason why a lot of small businesses are one, maybe two people. Trust, I think, is also another issue. Trusting someone else in your business, because a lot of small businesses, you don't know what you don't know when you start out. So sometimes you hire family and friends or people that are just not your best interest in mind, and they steal from you, or don't run your business the way you would have. And so You know, it sometimes it might be easier. You might feel it's easier to just be to do everything yourself, but honestly, I think that is you know shooting yourself in the foot. You can't do it all yourself. You know you need to have to hire and to grow. That's how your business grows. So um, I do understand the pain of it, though. I've been a one person business myself for a long time, and that is definitely what I mentioned to you. A lot of my fears, a lot of my problems as well. Just not being able to trust anyone with my business or feeling like, oh, I'm not making enough, but I am. I just need to release the reins a little bit because that can be tough too. You know, giving up the power because I've been a small one person operation for so long. Sometimes it's hard to make that leap.
What do you see as the added? Well, first of all, a reality with the Black economy is that we're the only people, maybe Native Americans fit this too, um, where there's only one market that supports us, the Black market. Every other business, if you're looking at Chinese, Mexicans, and obviously whites, um, they, get a general base of support that, is, of course, is their own community, but much more. Um, so that's a bind we're in, and I think we understand some of the reasons. I mean, what do you see as some of the reasons for that being the case? That Black businesses are, with exceptions, there's certain businesses that will generate broad support across various racial groups. But what do you see as the main reasons for the Black economy's business base being almost exclusively Black people?
Hmm. I don't know, honestly. I mean, I think it's lack of outreach past, you know, if you're only reaching out to people in your own community, they're the only ones that are gonna know about your business. So I think it's you know not not feeling like, you know, me personally, I feel like, you know, I want support from all communities. Yes, I want the support of my community more than ever, more than anyone, absolutely. But I do want the support of other communities as well because that's how my business is going to grow. And the same service that I give to someone in my own community, I want to give to someone else outside of my community. Because when those they bring their money to me, now that helps me grow and helps me grow my own community. So I'm not turning away anybody's money, anybody's dollar. So I have no problem reaching out past my own community to people that, you know, outside of me. But I do take pride in the fact that I am a Black owned business, and I do want to put money back into my communities, help my people. Yes, that's my priority for me. Um, just doesn't mean that I don't want to work with anyone else. So I think, you know, it's about opening up yourself to a wider market. I think that's one of the first things that you would have to do if you want to get outside of your own community.
I think the obvious part of that is that it's got to be a heavy amount of racism that is behind
Oh,
the difficulty of getting a broader base of support for Black business. I mean, for example, Blacks do a heavy amount of stuff in restaurant businesses, for example. And the average restaurant business generates a Black clientele. The ones that generate the cross cultural clientele, they almost have to be exceptional, exceptional. You know what I mean? Like in this area where I live, Oakland, Everett Jones is like premier barbecue place, and I've been to barbecue places all over the country. I don't know a place better, you know. And they got some prime locations and whatnot, but it's an exceptionally, you know, good business. I mean, their barbecue sauce is the key, but then everything else that they're delivering. But there's a lot of businesses that deliver a good product. In the case I'm dealing with restaurants, for example, and
Mhm.
they don't generate that kind of support. And I think it's part of what you're saying, but I think also there's a stereotype and stuff around blacks, and I think that affects, uh, you know, the kind of support you don't get from other groups. You
Well,
know,
of course, racism comes into play. It always does, unfortunately. Yeah, some other cultures, people may not want to support black businesses as well. But again, your job as a business owner is to put out the best product that you can. And as you said, I think your barbecue joint, to continue that example, the part of it is that they serve really good food. So, and people, no matter what, they like good food. So I think is it definitely important to have a good product or service. And I think excellence should always come into play, no matter what. So, if you want to be the best, because that is how you make, you get to the top, is to be it by being, being the best, showing excellence. So work on, being the best. If you're gonna do barbecue, make sure it's the best barbecue in the community, right? Because that's gonna make me come to you as opposed to someone else. So but definitely, I know racist. Obviously, that's always going to be there. The point is to be the best you can be, and then who people can make the choice that they want to make.
um, in the case of black business, the probably 98% or heavy percentage of the black business space is black people. So one of the assumptions that's made is blacks don't support black businesses. Well, if the only support black people get is black people, somebody's supporting them, and it's black people. So what's your take on how blacks view black businesses and their attitudes towards it? When the customer's attitude towards black businesses, what do you see as some of the range of attitudes there?
I mean, some people are all for it, and I think we should support. I mean, some people, I think, just I've heard I've heard people say, "Oh," and I may have even been guilty of saying it myself at one point, that you get treated so badly in the back business. You know how we are, but how we do, as we like to say. But I think it's still important to support. You know, your. I mean, it's tough. Some of the things may say, well, I get my stuff cheaper over by the Koreans or whoever, and I do understand you. And when it comes to your bottom line, you have to sometimes make hard choices about where you're going to shop. But I think that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with going and shopping at the Koreans, but I do think you should support your own local black business at least sometimes. Even if it's not exclusively, you still should say, well, hey, this is part of my community. Because again, remember this, it all trickles down into our, if we support our businesses, we're supporting our communities, we're supporting the dream. So I know for me personally, as I said, I do shop at the Korean market. I shop, but I also shop at the Russian market. And I definitely shop at the Jamaican market and the Caribbean market. So I try to spread my money around but all of these are in my local community that I'm talking about, which I think uplifts us all. So I would say to anyone who doesn't want to support the black business, I think that is a little short-sighted, and because it's more than just the corner store. Where as if you've been listening, it's about legacy.
What's your attitude about black businesses that are cooperatively owned? What do you think about black cooperatives?
I think they're great. I think it's great if they're run properly. If everyone does what they're set out to do, which can sometimes be a problem. But I think anytime you're bringing people together in the community for the greater good, I think that even if it doesn't always work out the way the expectation was, I think that it's great when people come together to try to for a common goal. So I do think that there is value in the co-ops. I have a cousin who's in one in Brooklyn, and she's been doing that for years. She swears by it. So um, yeah, I support it.
Yeah, because that also provides a opportunity for people to have an equal input, put capital in it, and get something out of it. But it's not where just one person gets everything. But I'm not opposed to one person owning a business, because that's the way a lot of people can go, I mean, in terms of
Hmm.
right now. And as you say, it provides a support for that person and their family, and you can do some other things. Most Black businesses, huge number of them, the person who's running the business also has a side job or
Hmm.
a main job that provides an income that then helps them to finance that business. Is that true?
I don't know the number on it, but I do know a lot of businesses are like that. And I mean, until my advice, until you know that your business is sustainable, you should keep another job to if you need it to, keep your family going, support your dream. But the goal obviously is to make that business support you, your family, and the community. So you want your business to grow. A lot of us maybe get stuck in the one person position and need to, you're not making enough money, and so may need to have that second job. um, Also, I think one of the benefits to people of keeping a regular job too is the retirement pension. As a one of the I think one of the downsides of being a small business is that owner is that you don't have a pension unless you create one for yourself. So this is where they do have things like solo 401ks and SEPs that you can create to fund, but you have to fund them yourself. In order to put away some money for your, for when you're not running your business no more. And I think one of thing that's important to think about is your exit strategy. Like what are you going to do with this business once you've gotten too old or you don't want to do it anymore? Let's say, are you going to sell it? Is it a business that you can sell? Is it one that you can leave to a family member, a son or a daughter, that they can carry it on? So these are all good things to consider also when you're starting your business, because as I said, there may be a point when you don't want to, you don't want to do this business anymore, and and you still need to be able to take care of, pay your mortgage, eat, and whatever else. So um, I think that is a lot of reasons why maybe especially solopreneurs would have would keep their job in order to keep certain benefits, health benefits as well. Health insurance is expensive. um, so I think it's more than just not being successful enough. I think there's other factors that might play into why a lot of small business owners still have a job. And I think maybe just as a safety net, just being afraid to make that leap and say, "Hey, I'm fully invested in my business."
There's a question here. Um, let me go to the first one here. This is Peggy Parks Miller. When seeking funding, especially through a bank, do you need a formal business plan?
Well, when you say formal, as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be 50 pages, but it does need to include not only just your mission statement and your plan for your business, but also you need to have financial projections. So they want to know, particularly when you're going for business funding, um, what is this business? What do you project that this business is going to make 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now? Because obviously they want to know that this money, they're investing their money, and there's going to be a return on their investment.
Yeah, and the real problem is we put our money in these banks, and they are not as open to lending to us as they are, for example, to whites. And
Correct.
it used to be that we had a fairly large number of black banks. We don't have as many now. So that's that's a whole area that we need to cover because it's a huge amount of money we're putting in there, and we're either getting crappy loans when it comes to, say, for example, mortgages on a house. Um, you really have to know what you're doing to guarantee that you get the mortgage you're entitled to. You know,
That's
so
it. I mean, the people. I mean, as you, if they need that balance sheet, profit and loss. Those are all things that you want to have for your business. If you're, as if I said, as you're just starting out in your business plan, yeah, you need to be able to show some of those financials. So that is important for if you're taking that next step to look for funding. So yeah.
Brother Ugawa has a question. How could small business owners organize themselves to improve their economic capacity to build more broadly throughout the Black community? And I would add to that, are there some efforts going on, where that of where Black businesses are cooperating to help do that?
As I mentioned, I know my cousin down in Brooklyn. There are a few cooperatives that I'm aware of. I'm not a part of any, but I'm aware of them. And again, anytime you're coming together for a common good, I think barring any the pitfalls that can happen, is a good thing. So I think we need probably more of that going forward. As you mentioned just now about black banks, we don't have as many of those. I think it's important for it would be great if people could come together, black businesses, to strengthen numbers. I think sometimes we tend to be fearful of joining up with each other, for various amounts of reasons. But I think there's a benefit there to doing so.
This is a comment that I think you might want to comment on. This is, again, Peggy Parks Miller. My husband and I had a small sole proprietor trucking business, and it was important to educate ourselves regarding capital, credit, and budgeting. Education regarding your business is key to success. Make any comments on that?
No, Peggy, you're absolutely right. I mean, I mentioned that getting to know all that you can and is definitely key. Budgeting is important. Raising capital, all of these things, they're all tied together. They're all part of helping you to get funding, and to grow your business. So those things are extremely important. The more you know, the more And if and I mentioned that earlier, if it's something, because some people are not numbers people, and I get you, for all you people out there that aren't, then you should make sure and find someone who is. Get yourself a good accountant, tax professional, lawyer. Those are great things to have, from the start, so that they can kind of advise you on the right steps to make. Um, Now, in terms of, there's always things that are stacked up against us in our community, unfortunately. And when you mentioned about they have predatory loan practices, we get higher interest rates, and when it's harder to secure funding. Um, these things they exist, and so we have to keep fighting against it, and that's the only way that we're going to overcome it. So you know. Make sure and have those numbers right, so that when you get to the bank, they have to find another reason other than that. There's no reason for them not to give you that loan when they look at your paperwork. So go back to Peggy's comment, the more you know, the better off you are. Yeah.
Imhotep, EM, and then HOTEP. He makes the comment. So to be clear, you're implying a building of a black economy as in for the first time. I don't think we're implying that this is for the first time. Want to comment
No,
on that?
no, that's not what we're implying. That's it.
You know, we have a black economy. That black economy, because of our relationship to the state, to the people that run the country, hasn't been um, collaborative and cooperative. Let's put it that way. It hasn't been like black wealth is something that this country has supported, let alone the institutions of the country. I mean, it's only recently black to get a mortgage. So we have a black economy, but that a black economy is constantly dealing with issues and has come under attack. Imhotep says we don't have black banks, plural, at a high clip at least, is because black folks don't make enough money to put into black banks for there to be more than a few.
I mean, that obviously some don't, but I think there is black wealth. I think maybe not being directed in the right directions might be part of that problem. But I do think that we, as communities, we generate a lot of money. I think we just don't spend our money the way, or are educated enough about how to spend our money is where the problems comes in. So I think the more we educate ourselves on these things, the better it would be for our communities. And so, having conversations like this are important because we do need more black banks. We do need more black businesses. We do need more of everything in it to build our community, to build that black wealth, that close that racial wealth gap, right? So, I mean, I don't know if I would say that we don't have enough money. I don't know if I would agree with that statement. I can understand why it might be said, but I don't know if I totally agree with it.
Not if we have nearly $3 trillion in gross income. You know, on the one hand, it's a lot less than say what whites have proportionally because their numbers are larger. But there's a history of black banking. For example, Frederick Douglass was brought into a black bank that was formed um, after the Civil War. And he was brought in to be the nominal head of it. But what happened is because it had big backing from wealthy people, a little from the government, there was a ripoff that occurred from whites who were managing that bank. And so blacks lost all their money. You know what I mean? And so, there's if you go and look at the history of the number of black banks when it was high and the number that's low, and do your research, you're going to see that it's not easy to capitalize a black bank, um, but and to continue it. And so, there are black banks. There have been more at one time, and within this economy that we don't control, it's not easy to start one and keep one going. But we
Right.
definitely have the wealth for it, you know?
All right. I mean, would you agree that we have more black millionaires and billionaires than we had 20 years ago?
Yeah. And the per capita income of blacks is higher than it was before, but then there's a gap between the income of whites and the income of blacks. And that's got to do with how the economy is structured. Like, for example, um, the corporate economy doesn't hire heavily blacks, but that's where the wealth is made, you know? They hire blacks, but not much. And so this attack that's been going on by Trump, for example, on federal employment. Well, three main sources of employment for blacks was local, state, and federal government. That's where the biggest number of employees for blacks come proportionally. And so when that's attacked, that has a heavy attack. But the key point is if most of the money is being made in the private sector and the private sector isn't hiring you on very much of a level, then that is, of course, a major reason why, our incomes are down. And one of the things that I think, and that's one of because we're getting to the end of this, one of the things that I think a lot of us miss when we talk about economic development and building black businesses is we miss the importance of having organizing in our community to increase the number of jobs that our people can get and that are good paying jobs. Since I led the only movement that did that across the board in the North, I know something about that. But Southern blacks appreciated that. And when they had movements against segregation and fighting to get the right to vote, it was the local community organizations that put boycotts on white owned stores and got jobs. But the national organizations in the South, they weren't focusing on that. So the grassroots do understand that that's important. And so that is a major thing that's important in terms of any kind of building of black wealth is you got to have some kind of income.
Agreed.
Negate that as not important is to really miss the boat. Because I can tell you, for example, when we started this movement in San Francisco, blacks were cut out of just about all jobs. You couldn't work in department stores, couldn't work in banks, couldn't work in supermarkets, name it. That was what you call Northern apartheid. It was economic, not just the way it was in the South, political. So that's an important part. And to this day, because it was a survey done by the sister who founded Black Lives Matter, I've referred to this survey before, and they were asking younger blacks what was the major issue for them. And their answer was good paying jobs so you can support a family. And the reason that you have a low marriage rate right now among blacks is that the average income of too many black males and females, but especially black males, is not enough to support a family because the average is about 20,000. Now the overall income is 56,490, but that's half. But there's another half below and some above, and a huge number are below. So that has to be a part of any economic development and rebuilding of black communities. And just the power of this boycott that's been carried out against Target is one example of that. And if you ignore that, for example, the Nation of Islam, Malcolm and his family were the primary organizers, and then others that joined, but they were the primary organizers that took a broke organization to an organization with over $70 million in assets. And that was comparable now to hundreds of millions of dollars of assets. But where did that money come from, the 70 million? It came from the jobs that Nation of Islam members that Malcolm heavily recruited provided when they joined the Nation of Islam. So I see some people who claim to be economic developers saying that if you're working for a white man, you're selling out. Really? Huh? Sell out? First of all, your money makes a profit from those businesses, so you're entitled to it. But secondly, everybody in this country, the majority of everybody works for somebody else. Now you can say, yeah, white people work for white people. Yeah, but those white people that own those businesses, they control the country and they control white people and they impoverish everybody. And so if you think they're hiring white people just out of the love of white people. You're kidding yourself. They'll hire them before us, but they don't care about anybody but their bottom line. As the great scholar, um, the great artist said yesterday, the God of America is money last week, Dewey Crumpler. That's the real God. And there's a poem by a great African American poet called America the Pimp. And everything's about everybody needs money. And he even says God needs money. God doesn't. What he means is the preacher does.
Yeah, all right. Well,
Huh?
I think I do that, and that's why I think on black, particularly black entrepreneurship is what we're talking about is so important because we want to create more jobs in our community. We want to and hire within in our communities and build more jobs. I mean, and even the money that you earn. Okay, as you mentioned it just now, if a lot of blacks might work for white people or someone else, but if you take that money now and you now turn it into a business that serves your community, then what's the difference? Money is money, as you said to me. That's why I say, I mean, but as long as you have an understanding of who you are and what we're trying to build, I think that's where it's most important. It's not so much where the money comes from, and that might be just my opinion, but I think it's more important that we keep our eye on the prize, and it's about closing that wealth gap and creating generational wealth, building something. As I said, build that business for your kids. Hire your kids to work in your business. Teach them the business. Representation matters. When we see more black businesses in our communities, then we want more to come, right? So I think it's about legacy, and as I mentioned, and growing and passing on these things so that we get better as we go along.
Yeah. The brother we had on last week, um, great artist Dewey Crumpler. Now I was asking him because he lives fairly well, and he was fortunate. He went and got him an art degree, a master in fine arts, and so he taught at a art institute while putting most of his time into his artwork and community work. And so I was asking him, well, how did he do that? Because did he get retirement? Well, that art school collapsed after 100 years. But even if he had got retirement, it wouldn't be that much because art schools don't have the kind of finances that state universities or big private universities have. And so I won't go into the whole story, but he said, I don't buy into the myth of the poor artist. He said, my sons have to be fed. My wife ain't going for that. And so I don't know what he said he did, but he went into business himself and financed himself. You know what I mean? And so some of us who got this poverty mentality, which I understand, I again say, this is a semi-colonial system, meaning it's got elements of colonialism and slavery. And colonialism is about people coming into your country and taking it over, ripping the wealth off, running it politically on every level, And the main thing is underdevelopment of the people you take over and the development, the enrichment of the people who take over. So capitalism is basically based on the profits made from slavery and what's often left out, genocide of Native Americans, our people, and other people. So I'm not missing that part. I'm a revolutionary. You got to restructure society so there's no rich, so that there's poor, you know? And that's what my twin lineal model is about. Male, female, equal empowerment is about equal empowerment and equal wealth. You know what I mean? So um, this discussion is not a discussion of black capitalism and we're going to all become wealthy and rich if we just do these rules. No, it's about using some common sense with what little you have to make a difference. Now, there's a point here. Someone was saying that I should, Imhotep, reach out to Gerard Bell, and apparently he has written a book, because he did have a comment earlier on Black wealth. I'm trying to find that comment here. He made a comment on the myth of Black buying power. Okay. Yeah, Imhotep, Dr. Obachashaka, may I suggest you reach out to Dr. Jared Ball, author of Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. I haven't read the book, but if he's saying that our income is too weak for us to exercise Black buying power, then that's false. You know what I mean? And all I'm saying is, I'm an economic developer. I built housing for people. I bought housing for organization. I know something about this. But I led the only successful Black Power, Black freedom movement that defeated an entire economic power structure, white power, including the biggest bank in the world. And so if by that title he means that there's a myth about Black buying power, that is, it's not real power, if that's what he means, that's false. That's absolutely false. And what I would say is that that's been one of our biggest weaknesses, is that we have not exhausted, fully used the power we have. And one of them is economic. And we literally brought down an entire white economy over 3 years, covering every sector of the economy, producing thousands of jobs for Black people, and not one for any of us. And that Black community was smaller than the Black communities of Chicago or New York or many of the big cities, Atlanta, Georgia, and places like that. But if you have good strategy, whatever your community is, you can use it to enhance the wealth and jobs we produced, like in supermarkets, retirement plans, vacation plans, health plans. And the main thing I want to stress is those jobs we produced then, they are still here now, because that's the way we organize. You need a plan, that's what you need. So part of economic development is job development. But if we have a mentality that we can't do it, then of course you won't try. So I just want to add that. See if there's anything else. Stands for blah blah blah.
I was looking at them too.
No,
I was looking at the comments. Yeah.
Okay. Imhotep opined that colonialism is a more sophisticated form of slavery. That's true. It's true. And it's hard to define the oppression that we're under, because it's not one or the other. It's kind of a mixture. Because if it was pure colonialism, then if you're under colonial system where someone comes to your country, implants their system of control economically, politically, and every other way, then the answer is easy. Decolonization. Throw them out, set up your own nation. Now, obviously, that's not the solution to this problem. Number one, you can't throw white people out. Number two, he didn't come to our country, that is America, and colonize us. We were taken from Africa and brought here. And then we transitioned from slavery to state slavery, what we call Southern apartheid. And now we've transitioned to something else in between that. So it's a mixture of the two. And so the answers for how we get our liberation is also a different answer, more complex. But clearly, it's building our own power, viewing ourselves as a nation, and doing all the things we can to empower our people, both personally and as a group. and as a nation. And over time, this will evolve. But we have strategic power. And I've gone through some of this before. And because our culture is so central, when we move everybody else. We cause chain reactions, not just in this country, but around the world. Milton Kraft, the mindset shift from poverty to success is the death of us all, not because we rise, but because we often bury the parts of ourselves that made us human in the climb. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Part of the confusion on the last election is some of the rich blacks who are only looking at Trump's tax cut, but not looking at how it's going to cut the throats of the average person, not even being concerned. They bought into that myth. That was the myth of their success and them only being concerned about their success, even though some of the people who did this are really nice people, really nice. They treat their mothers nice. I think they treat their sisters nice. I don't know what they give their sisters when they make their millions of dollars, but they seem to be just completely blind when it comes to the overall interests of the people, And I have a few people in mind when I'm thinking about that. People I really like, athletes and stuff that are close to billionaires, and they do individual things to help people. And some of them are really helpful. I'm not putting them all in the category, but some of them are just looking at their bottom line.
That's it.
So, yeah. And how can you be successful if your people are oppressed? And ask the Jews of Germany about that. Oh, they were successful. They even owned some banks. They owned a lot of. They didn't run the German economy. That's a myth. Same myth you have in this country. If you don't own the army, you don't own the economy. Jews don't run this country, by the way. You don't hear me talking about the myth of Jewish power. The Jews are secondary. Yeah, they got some power. But if you don't have state power, which is the military, that's the guns, baby. That's what a state is. The instruments of force and violence that keeps everybody else in check. You hear me? Then you don't run the economy. So, I mean, that's why a Black Wall Street could be attacked. And in this case, it wasn't the whole government, but they bombed Black Wall Street. That was an attack of the white power elite as well as the masses of whites in that town. It wasn't just some individual thing. So when blacks do anything in this country, we're faced with that. So I understand it, So these have been some good comments. Joy, you have anything you want to say to close this discussion?
Well, I just, I think I'm all for, as I said, I'm all for about ownership, Black ownership, entrepreneurship. And so if you have an idea, a passion out there, and I say go for it, but follow the steps. So if you want to know more about the steps that I outlined here, I did put together I call it a checklist that you can download off my website that has all like the steps that I mentioned, and I think a few more. And also, if you're looking for other resources on I also have a lot of things to help you with financial literacy. And I have two books out. One called Jailer's Juice Bar, about a young lady who opened her own lemonade stand, and about the steps that she took to open it. So it's for 8 to 13-year-olds, but I think it's for kids of all ages. Anyone who's looking to start a business can benefit from the information in there. I also have another book called The Kids Financial Dictionary, which kind of is it goes hand in hand with the Jailer's Juice Bar, where it defines a lot of financial terms, basic terms. Again, great for 8 to 13-year-olds, but for anyone who's looking to just increase their knowledge about financial literacy and financial terms, there's great illustrations in there, and I included some fun facts. So, if you want any more information on anything that I mentioned here just now, you can go to my website. It is colorsconsultinggroup.com. And if you check the downloads page, you can get that checklist that I mentioned, and see some of my other offerings. So
Thank you guys for listening. And Shaka, thank you once again for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure. And I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, well, brilliance is always appreciated and passion. And while I'm good at economic development, it is not my driving passion. You know what I mean? It's part of it, but it ain't my driving passion. And it
Understood.
obviously is yours. And when you really put yourself into what you love doing the most, that's the most important thing. And
That's the reward,
you're one
honestly.
sharp sister. And I think that the stuff you've been given is the basic ABCs that people can use. And I'm gonna say this: I'm a revolutionary,
Yes,
but
you
I'm
are.
not flat on my butt. You know what I mean? You
Hmm.
don't have to be. And the system's tried to kill me, do my jobs in, do everything. I expect that. That's warriors. It's like if you're in a ring, you're going to throw punches. They're going to throw punches at you. You're going to get hit. I've never lost a battle, but I got hit.
Yeah, well, sometimes you're going to get hit.
But I beat them. But the key point is you can be a revolutionary and not flat on your butt. Now, I'm not knocking people who are, because some of them can't avoid it. The state comes down on them in such a way that it just collapses them. I understand that. I'm a strategist. I try and avoid those situations, but you can't always enjoy them. Sometimes you're standing around, a Mack truck is coming after you and you just can't get out of the way. Well, too bad. That happens, right?
Hmm.
And the system is good at that. But the point is, if somebody like me, who spent 65 years, 66 years fighting this system and can enjoy myself every minute, because I got 3 rules, remember? WWW, win, win, win.
That's
Those are
right.
mine. So just like Dewey Crumpler, I'm not into the woe is me. I'm into this and they did this to me. I understand what they're doing. If I was them, I'd do the same thing. I
Right.
understand. I'm not justifying it, but I understand if you got a worthy opponent, you're going to try and take them out. I get it. You know what I mean?
That is
That's
the
what
art of war.
face. But I'm not talking about everybody here. Everybody here, no warrior. I'm just simply saying you can improve your life by doing some simple things and be consistent with them. And at least you won't be flat on your behind. But if you are, it ain't your fault. This is a system designed to do that. It ain't your fault. But a whole lot of us can help a whole lot of us more to do better in the short term while we're fighting to create a society in the long term that is just for all of us.
That's right.
Imhotep, to your point regarding mindset, is largely the consequence of capitalism. By and large, the wealthy didn't become wealthy doing good. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you something. It's not only capitalism. When you read my book, Seba and Sodiah, you're going to see where this comes from. It's also in Marxism, they'll do the same thing. Even though they say that they want to equitably distribute the wealth, um, there's a philosophical and cultural mindset that Europeans developed that transcends all systems. And when elites, and always the people who are in power in the Western world are elites, when they get in power, they grab more of it for themselves under all systems. And that's what you need to understand. But we don't understand that because we haven't studied their philosophy, their culture, other than white supremacy. Huh? And that is going down the tubes, even though it doesn't look like it with Trump. Trump is bringing this country down. The policies he's carrying out are hurting poor people, but it's hurting the power of this country. And I don't like to see it, but at the same time, as Malcolm said, what makes them sad makes me glad. So it's a two-sided thing. I don't want to see any poor people hurt, especially my people, but any people. But I also don't want to see them continue to be able to put the clamps on everybody. So I hope people got something out of this. I surely did. Thank you, Joy.
Thank
Pure,
you, Shaka.
pure pleasure. And until next week, we'll see everybody again.
Until the next time, thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. And once again, Shaka, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on.
All right.